Earlier this year, I talked about how Dante from Devil May Cry 3 hits all the marks on what it means to be a perfect protagonist, the perfect mold for an action hero, and everything in between. People really seem to dig that character study, to put it mildly. So with that, I think it's high time that I do my due diligence and dedicate a separate video to Dante's counterpart, his alpha to his omega, his yin to his yang. And in fact, the first heir of the legendary Sparta. I'm speaking of course of his twin brother Virgil, and while I did briefly touch on Virgil in that previous video, I only addressed him in the sense of posing as the perfect counterbalance to Dante's hot-headedness, how he put out his fire essentially, presenting him as merely an obstacle for our protagonist rather than a living being with his very own aspirations, and dare I say, motivations. Not alluding to any credit or credence of his own character and plight, nor considering where some of his malice may have stemmed from. So I want to make it clear, right here, right now, that I think Virgil perfectly fits the mold for what a perfect anti-hero should be in fiction. So why am I labeling him an anti-hero and not as a plain hero or villain? Well, see, when it comes to Dante, it is very clear cut that he's morally upright, a protagonist anyone can get behind from the drop, while Virgil is rather portrayed as the stereotypical sinister one, unleashing ancient demons into the world and whatnot. Can't get more seemingly evil than that, right? He stirs up the initial conflict for his brother and the player, so you're made to be pinned up against this guy. You're very much encouraged to have a surface level distaste for Virgil, to box him in as the archetypal villain you would find in your typical video game. And why would you initially think otherwise? When you first come face to face with Virgil, it's really intimidating. But the more time you spend with Devil May Cry 3, the more you start to pick up on Virgil's nuances and, well, you start to appreciate the enigma that is Virgil, his overly strict try-hard fighting style, his cold, stoic demeanor. And heck, maybe you even start to empathize where he's coming from, even if you're not in total favor of his conquest and moral compass. He possesses a certain charm you don't get from Dante or the other cast of characters, and his badass one-of-a-kind voice is definitely a contributing factor.
Might controls everything.
Virgil is a literal embodiment of morally ambiguous, as you'll come to find out that he's not just the outright evil that you once perceived him as the plot thickens. He's just wholeheartedly selfish rather than hate-filled, and he's downright obsessive when it comes to obtaining power, which is a common trait shared amongst many popular villains, one of which is even in this game, but that seems to be Virgil's only fall from grace. A trait that can be subdued over time, because keep in mind he is only 19 in this game, so he's liable to be more headstrong with his intrinsic immaturity. He's misguided, in other words. He actually shows no allegiance to the demons that he unleashes. They are merely a byproduct left by him trying to obtain his father's power that was sealed away thousands of years ago with said demons. They are simply a means to an end. He holds no interest in taking over the human world like his partner in crime Arkham. But make no mistake, Virgil is still ruthless, even stabbing his partner Arkham due to him showing mercy to his daughter Mary. He sees this as fickle and simply disposes of a potential burden. Although we can observe in this particular scene a softer side of Virgil as he holds a certain reverence for the humans down below as he overlooks from atop of the Timinagru, his body language exuding deference with head bowed in silence. It's also worth noting that this stance here is awfully similar to the stance the Knights Templar would hold during prayer, a stance often associated with stoic protectors, almost seeming regretful about the innocent lives lost due to the matter. He sees humanity as weak, so perhaps he pities the humans, or perhaps he shows mercy because of the endearment he still holds for his mother Eva, who we know was fully human, who herself was killed when demons were unleashed upon the world when he and Dante were only children. His quest for power could be attributed to his lack of power to protect him and his mother during that inciting incident. While Dante would rather hide behind his woes with jokes and partying due to their childhood trauma, Virgil instead drowns his sorrow out in anger and resentment. He resents that his mother was too weak, anger for his brother for embracing that weakness, and most of all, he resents his own impotence. He never wants to face levels of low like that again. So he seeks power. If he had been stronger, say like his father, his mother would still be alive and nobody would be able to take anything he held dear from him again. To that end, his demon side and human side began to represent something more black and white. power and weakness. From his perspective, weakness is a fault within itself. It's the enemy of happiness, a sign telling others that they can take advantage of you. Choosing to embrace your weakness he sees as foolishness. It's practically begging for bad things to happen to those around you and yourself. Choosing to be weak is basically inadvertently killing those who you care about. Power should be acquired at all costs. Why love something if it will just be taken away from you? In turn, he seeks refuge and comfort in said power. And there is no denying that Virgil is indeed powerful, almost seemingly unstoppable. The only worthy adversary is of course his own flesh and blood. But when it comes to the wandering demons, they might as well crawl back to the depths from whence they came. He even manages to finish Beowulf in one fell swoop. But just because Virgil is hungry for more power doesn't equate to his actions loudly displaying his lust for it. He only speaks when necessary. He wastes no time with extravagant words or actions. He's precise and calculated at all times. The only time we see him break character is when he lashes out when his sacrifice doesn't go as planned, unlocking the last seal.
Why isn't this working? Is there something missing?
He is still half human after all. Flaws seep out even from the brick house that is Virgil. His mannerisms and demeanor wouldn't have been conducted so flawlessly and convincingly if it weren't for the excellent performance by Daniel Southworth. We probably wouldn't have gotten the Virgil that we know and love today if it weren't for Dan. This is just some of the things he touched upon when asked about his portrayal of Virgil in this Capcom interview.
Director Itsuno-san has suggested that certain aspects of Virgil's character didn't really fall into place until he met you and saw how you handled a Japanese sword. As he described it, it showed a respect for authentic Japanese swordsmanship, but balanced with a slightly rough, wild style that perfectly fits Virgil's profile of a Western man using a Japanese sword. In your performance, were you conscious of this notion of Japanese sword fighting with a slight Western twist, or did that just come about naturally?
I was aware of it, and at first I worried if it would have cost me the job. I knew enough about samurai culture and swordsmanship to take a serious and disciplined approach. I practiced and found an expert to work with. In this way, I was very Japanese in character. I also knew that I would not attain the specificity of a refined Japanese swordsman in so short of a time period. The only way to overcome this handicap was to use my own 30 years of martial arts experience and 20 years of film experience to make deliberate movements I could own with the nuance of an experienced and seasoned character such as Virgil. I even developed some good old cowboy flair. In this way, I was very Western.
What other things did you find crucial to your portrayal of Virgil? What defines him as a character to you?
I think that fortunately for me, what was crucial to my portrayal of Virgil was that he was a reflection of my own personal struggle as an actor at that very moment in time. I was intense, unyielding, doggedly tenacious, and my focus and operating from a dark, emotional disposition. I was able to express this inner intensity as the character. What defines Virgil as a character to me is that while he seems like the perfect samurai in his very calm and calculated demeanor, you can always sense the simmering intensity and even rage. When he finally does unleash, it's quite satisfying.
What was your favorite sequence or moment to perform? What was the most challenging?
Believe it or not, my favorite sequences to perform are not actually the action sequences. I enjoy really digging in and trying to find ways to make the talking moments more interesting to watch. That will always remain the most challenging and therefore the most exhilarating challenge for me. His calm and careful personality is even reflected in his playstyle when you get to play as him in the special edition of DMC3. You're better off playing while utilizing little mobility and calculating your every move tactfully like you would in his action cutscenes, rather than going balls to the wall like you would when playing Dante. You're almost punished if you try to play Virgil like Dante. Even his coding doesn't want to be associated with his twin brother. What you get in Virgil's campaign is an entirely different feeling game with different gratifications when utilizing different strategies. While Dante's playstyle usually revolves around performing hectic and zany combos performed with a certain fluidity, Virgil's playstyle is very static and rigid by comparison, only demolishing multiple foes through consistent charging of power moves and swift movements such as the oh-so iconic Judgment Cut. Despite the twin brothers wanting to act like they are opposites that clash with each other, they actually complement each other quite well and are more alike than they would like to admit. They both hate being Cambion. with each brother embracing one side of it more. Dante reps the human side and humanity in general, while Virgil reps his demonic side with pride. And ultimately, I feel like the ideal goal for them both is to meet halfway on the spectrum and accept their lineage. Dante grows and comes to terms with who he is by the end of the game, but Virgil doesn't. He would rather reject and sacrifice his humanity and be sealed away in the demon realm forever, rather than accept his humanity or accept an act of humanity from his brother. Both Virgil and Dante embody incomplete aspects of their duality, different sides of the same coin. Dante evolves as a character and surpasses his brother once he accepts this duality. He realizes that demons may have great power with which to protect, but only humans have something worth protecting. Virgil never realizes this and suffers all the more for this. His overly caring nature doesn't come from kindness, therefore he was the reason for his own demise. Dante, for all his flippant attitude, actually cares. He found that love that allowed Sparta to push his power to the limits of demonkind. Sparta, unlike every other demon, cared. He cared about humanity, justice, and eventually for his wife, Eva. For all his worship of his father and his demon heritage, Virgil missed the whole point that separated Sparta from every other demon: to be able to shed a tear for others. Although, you could wager Virgil did technically achieve his goal of wanting to be like his father, being sealed away in the demon world, stripped him of his humanity, and he is ready to take on Mundus just like Sparta before him. It's all just so poetic. Virgil is definitely more of a complex character than Dante is, a character that's interesting to observe and try to dissect. It's also Itsuno-san's favorite character, and it's really easy to see why. Virgil is a showstopper.